The doorbell rings at midnight. A single father opens it to find the most intimidating woman in the city standing there with a suitcase. The same woman whose harsh words crushed his job application just hours earlier. The same woman who now has nowhere else to go, asterisk. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of unexpected connections and second chances. Mark Winters never expected his joke to become reality. Not on a night when the rain pounded against his windows like an angry fist, and certainly not with Eliza Stone, CEO of Stone Enterprises and notoriously known as the Ice Queen of the business world. Earlier that day, Mark had sat across from her in the most important job interview of his life. A position that would finally give him and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, the stability they desperately needed after 3 years of struggling since his wife's death. "Your resume shows significant gaps, Mr. Winters," Eliza had said, her voice as cold as her reputation. Her tailored charcoal suit and perfectly styled dark hair exuded power and intimidation. Not a single emotion crossed her face as she systematically dismantled his qualifications. "I understand your concerns," Mark had replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "But those gaps represent time I needed to be there for my daughter after losing her mother. I've maintained freelance work throughout, and Stone Enterprises requires employees who can demonstrate consistent commitment," she interrupted. "Your situation, while unfortunate, suggests unpredictability. We need reliability, not sob stories." The words had cut deep. As the interview concluded with a perfunctory rejection, Mark had gathered his portfolio with trembling hands. Something in him snapped, not in anger, but in unexpected compassion when he noticed the storm brewing outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office. "Looks like a rough night ahead," he'd said, nodding toward the darkening sky. "The weather service is predicting flooding in the downtown area. If you get stuck." He'd laughed then, a nervous sound. "You could just move in with us. My daughter and I have a spare room." The joke had fallen flat against Eliza's icy stare. She dismissed him with a curt, "That won't be necessary," and turned back to her computer. Now, 12 hours later, Mark stared in disbelief at the soaking wet figure on his doorstep. Eliza Stone's perfectly styled hair now hung in wet strands around her face. Her expensive suit was drenched, and her normally commanding presence seemed diminished by the elements. "My car," she began, her voice lacking its usual authority. "The downtown streets are flooded. My penthouse building lost power and is being evacuated. I tried 3 hotels. Everything's full because of the storm." She paused, visibly struggling with her next words. "Your address was in your application file." Mark stood frozen, his mind racing to process the surreal situation. Behind him, a small voice called out. "Daddy? Who's at the door?" Lily appeared beside him in her unicorn pajamas, her curious eyes taking in the bedraggled woman on their doorstep. "You're all wet," Lily observed with a child's directness. "Are you okay?" Something in Eliza's expression shifted at the sight of the little girl, a momentary softening that vanished so quickly Mark almost missed it. "This is Ms. Stone," Mark explained to his daughter, making a split-second decision. "She needs a place to stay tonight because of the storm." "Like a sleepover?" Lily's face brightened with excitement. Mark stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in before you catch pneumonia." Eliza hesitated, her pride visibly warring with necessity. Finally, she stepped across the threshold into their modest home. "I appreciate this," she said stiffly. "I'll compensate you, of course." "We don't need your money," Mark replied, surprising himself with his firmness. "But you look like you could use a towel and some dry clothes." As he led her to their small guest room, Mark couldn't help but notice how out of place she looked in their cozy, slightly cluttered home. Family photos lined the walls, most featuring Lily and Mark, some including his late wife, Sarah. Crayon drawings were proudly displayed on the refrigerator. A half-completed puzzle occupied the coffee table. It was everything Eliza's minimalist penthouse wasn't: lived in, warm, imperfect. The bathrooms across the hall, Mark explained, handing her a stack of towels and some of his old sweatpants and a t-shirt. They'll be too big, but they're dry. Thank you, she said, the words sounding foreign on her lips. After she disappeared into the bathroom, Mark found Lily watching him with curious eyes. Is she the lady from your job interview? The one who said no? Mark nodded, wondering how to explain the complexities of the situation to an 8-year-old. Sometimes people need help, even people who've hurt our feelings, he said finally. Lily considered this with the serious expression she often wore when processing new information. Like when Emma was mean to me at school but then I shared my lunch when she forgot hers. Mark smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Exactly like that, sweetheart. When Eliza emerged from the bathroom, she looked transformed. Without her power suit and perfect makeup, dressed in Mark's oversized clothes with her hair wrapped in a towel, she seemed almost human. I made hot chocolate, Lily announced proudly, holding up a mug decorated with painted daisies. Daddy says it helps when you're sad or cold or both. Eliza accepted the mug with visible uncertainty. I don't usually drink hot chocolate. Then you're missing out, Lily informed her solemnly. It's basically a hug in a cup. A ghost of a smile flickered across Eliza's face, so brief Mark thought he might have imagined it. The storm raged outside, rattling windows and sending occasional power flickers through the house. Mark prepared the guest room while Lily, seemingly oblivious to their guests' discomfort, chattered away about her school project on butterflies. They start as something completely different, she explained earnestly to Eliza. Caterpillars don't know they're going to be butterflies. Isn't that amazing? They just build their chrysalis because that's what they're supposed to do, and then they come out totally changed. Eliza nodded, her expression unreadable. That is, remarkable. Later, after Lily had finally been convinced to go to bed, Mark found Eliza standing in their small living room, examining the photos on the wall. Your wife? She asked, gesturing to a picture of Sarah. Mark nodded. Cancer. 3 years ago. I'm sorry, she said, and for once, the words didn't sound like a corporate platitude. We're managing, Mark replied. Some days are harder than others. Your daughter seems well-adjusted. Kids are resilient. More than we give them credit for. He paused. But they also need stability. That's why the position at Stone Enterprises would have been perfect. Regular hours, good benefits. Eliza turned to face him. You were qualified for the job, Mr. Winters. Mark, he corrected. And if I was qualified, why did you reject me? She looked away. Experience has taught me that personal complications interfere with professional commitments. You mean being a single parent? Yes. The honesty was refreshing, even if the sentiment wasn't. Some of the most dedicated employees I've known were parents, Mark said. They have more reason than most to show up and do their best. Perhaps, she conceded, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. The lights flickered again, then went out completely, plunging the apartment into darkness. Hold on, Mark said, navigating the familiar space to find the emergency lantern. When he returned with the soft glow illuminating his path, he found Eliza standing exactly where he'd left her, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable in the darkness. We lose power a lot in this building, he explained, setting the lantern on the coffee table. Old wiring. You could move, she suggested. Mark laughed without humor. On a freelancer's income with a child to support? This place is a steal for the neighborhood, which means Lily can attend a good school. Something shifted in Eliza's expression, a realization, perhaps, of the real-world implications of decisions made in boardrooms. Tell me about your company, Mark said, changing the subject. Not the corporate mission statement. Why did you start it? The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, he thought she might retreat behind her professional facade, but instead, she sat down on the edge of the sofa. My father was a small business owner, she began. He built custom furniture, beautiful pieces, true craftsmanship. But he was terrible with finances, contracts, protecting his work. A larger company essentially stole his designs, mass-produced inferior versions, and drove him out of business. She traced the pattern on the sofa absently. He died believing he was a failure. I started Stone Enterprises to create the kind of business infrastructure that could have saved his company, one that protects innovation while ensuring profitability. That's not what I expected, Mark admitted. What did you expect? The usual. Ambition. Power. The thrill of the corporate climb. A wry smile touched her lips. Those came later. The conversation flowed more easily after that, the darkness somehow making it simpler to speak honestly. Mark told her about meeting Sarah in college, about their dreams of traveling the world before settling down, dreams interrupted by an unexpected pregnancy that they'd quickly embraced. He spoke of building his freelance graphic design business while Sarah pursued her teaching career, of the devastating diagnosis that had upended their carefully constructed life. In turn, Eliza shared glimpses of her own journey, the scholarship to business school, the sexism she'd encountered in her early career, the armor of perfectionism she'd developed in response. People call you the Ice Queen, you know, Mark said at one point. I know, she replied. It's preferable to the alternatives women in my position are often called. The power returned just before dawn, illuminating two people who had somehow moved from opposite ends of the sofa to sitting side by side. I should get some sleep, Eliza said, suddenly aware of the intimacy that had developed in the darkness. And you should too. Mark nodded, equally discomfited by the return to reality. Of course. Good night, Eliza. Good night, Mark. The next morning brought sunshine and receding floodwaters. It also brought the return of Eliza's professional demeanor as she emerged from the guest room dressed once again in her now dry suit, hair pulled back in a severe bun. Lily, however, was undeterred by the transformation. I made you breakfast, she announced proudly, pointing to a slightly lopsided stack of pancakes. They're butterfly-shaped. Kind of. That's very thoughtful, Eliza said, looking genuinely perplexed by the gesture. Sit, Mark encouraged her. Lily's pancakes are famous in this household. The domesticity of the scene, Lily chattering about school, Mark refilling coffee cups, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, seemed to discomfit Eliza more than the previous night's vulnerability. I should call my driver, she said after finishing a surprisingly large portion of pancakes. Before you go, Mark said, I wanted to thank you. For what? You're the one who provided shelter. For being honest. About why you didn't hire me. He smiled slightly. Most employers hide behind corporate speak. Eliza studied him for a moment. Your portfolio was impressive. Particularly the campaign you designed for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Thank you, Mark said, surprised by the compliment. Daddy makes the best pictures, Lily chimed in. He stays up late working sometimes, but he never misses my bedtime stories. Something flickered in Eliza's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or reassessment. Her driver arrived 30 minutes later. As she prepared to leave, Lily surprised her with a hug that left the CEO momentarily speechless. Mark simply offered his hand. If you ever need shelter from another storm. He began. I'll call ahead this time, she finished, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. 3 days later, Mark received an email from Stone Enterprises' HR department requesting a second interview. 1 week after that, he was offered the position, with flexible hours and the option to work from home when necessary. When he asked Eliza about the change of heart during his first day, she merely said, I reconsidered the value of commitment in different contexts. But Lily had a different theory, which she shared with her father that evening as he tucked her into bed. I think she was a caterpillar, the 8-year-old said wisely. And our house was like a chrysalis. Mark laughed. People don't change that quickly, sweetheart. Butterflies do, Lily insisted. And anyway, she looked at you the way Emma's mom looks at Emma's new dad. Mark dismissed the observation as a child's romantic imagination. But over the following months, as Eliza began to show up at company family days, as she occasionally joined them for dinner, to discuss work, as her icy reputation gradually thawed, he began to wonder if his daughter might be onto something after all. 6 months later, when Eliza appeared at their door again, this time with theater tickets instead of a soaked suit, Mark couldn't help but recall his throwaway comment during that stormy night. You could just move in here. It had been a joke then. But as Eliza's visits became more frequent, as Lily began to look for her at school events, as Mark found himself sharing more late-night conversations that had nothing to do with work, the idea seemed less and less absurd. 1 year to the day after that stormy night, Eliza stood in their living room, surveying the space with a critical eye. This apartment really is too small, she observed. Are you offering me a raise? Mark teased. No, she replied seriously. I'm offering a solution. There's a house for sale 3 blocks from Lily's school. 3 bedrooms, a yard, an office space for your freelance work. Mark stared at her. Eliza, I can't afford. We could, she interrupted. Together. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Mark finally managed. I'm not good at this, Eliza admitted, a rare vulnerability crossing her features. Relationships. Family. I've always focused on work. You're better than you think, he said softly. Lily adores you. And you? She asked, the question barely audible. Mark closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. The woman who showed up at my door that night? I wouldn't have given her a second thought. But the woman who ate butterfly pancakes with my daughter? Who comes to every school play? Who calls to say goodnight when she's traveling for business? He smiled. That woman I could definitely see sharing a home with. So that's a yes. Eliza asked, her usual confidence returning. On one condition, Mark replied. You have to be the one to tell Lily. She's been planning our wedding since month 3. Eliza laughed, a full, genuine sound that still surprised him every time he heard it. Deal. As they sealed the agreement with a kiss, Mark reflected on how a single storm had changed the course of 3 lives. How sometimes the most unexpected guests can become the most essential parts of your world. And how even the coldest hearts can thaw when given shelter, pancakes, and the love of a family that sees beyond the surface. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share new stories of unexpected connections and life-changing moments every week. Leave a comment below telling us about a time when an unexpected encounter changed your life.